All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Secret Term Rates. Beat the Spreadsheet with myself, Brian Lysing, your host. Here working with financial brokerage, and for those of you who might not be familiar with us, we are a national marketing organization working primarily with independent agents in the areas of life insurance, annuities, long-term care, critical illness, disability, and now Medicare supplements. And I've been with financial brokerage for about 15 years now, after spending some time out in the field selling primarily life insurance. And this morning I'm going to share with you 4 different ideas that can help you beat the spreadsheet or come up with prices that are lower than anything you or your competition is going to see in the typical term life spreadsheet comparison. And this will take certainly no more than 30 minutes. I'll try to keep it around 20 if I can. And at the end of the session, we'll get to as many questions as all of you are able to type. So let's go ahead and get to it here. We've got 4 main ideas that I'll be discussing. And again, these are all ways that you can come up with prices below anything you're going to see on any company's comparison spreadsheets out there. We're going to discuss how that you can use an income stream death benefit to lower the prices, how you can ladder multiple policies to lower the price. There's a unique option with one company we work with here that allows a decreasing death benefit. And there's also a couple of interesting concepts that we got from a couple of our major carriers that prove that in some cases a universal life can indeed cost less than a term policy for your clients. So we'll go over that as well. All right, so here is what I would call your typical term life insurance spreadsheet. And if you would run this off of our website, financial-brokerage.com, you would see actual company names. I took them off for this purpose here. We don't necessarily need to know which companies they are. It's the pricing that's important. And so for this example, we have a 40-year-old preferred non-smoking male, $1 million of 30-year term, and these are the annual prices with the top 5 carriers that I ran on that particular day. And I would say, this is pretty typical. You plug in the information and you're going to see the prices, and they are what they are. No matter which quoting software you use, the prices are going to be exactly the same. And there were only so many major players in term life insurance in this country, and they're all going to be pretty close to one another. So if you're running these rates, another agent is running these rates, your prospect has gone online and found some rates on a quoting calculator themselves, everybody is coming up with the exact same rates in the exact same companies. So what can you do to help differentiate yourself from the competition and show that you have got some value beyond the other person or beyond some random computer out there? If you ask the right questions, then you're going to be well positioned to be able to show your client an even lower price than what they're finding out there. I will tell you this, though. Sometimes you don't have to have the absolute lowest price. Keep that in mind, which I'll be discussing. Lowering the price will usually lower the commissions that you're going to receive as well. So be careful with that. And it also in many ways cuts down on the coverage over time or initially for the client. And there are all sorts of reasons that may pop up decades down the road that the client can't foresee today. They're going to have other reasons to have some additional coverage. And so you can make a good argument for having the full policy and selling them the $1 million 30-year term. But you know what? That doesn't work in every case. Sometimes you really are in competition, or there's a budget that you have to stay within, and it'd be nice to be able to give the client, the exact amount of coverage that meets their needs. So with all that being said, pick your spots to use these ideas. I'm going to launch right into the first one here. So what if the reason for your client's coverage need is to replace their income? Well, with one simple example, we can save our client 23% off of the best price we saw on this page right here, the $1,465, and we're going to take almost a quarter off of that price. And here's how we're going to do it. Our old death benefit, $1 million, we determined client needs for 30 years. Old premium is $1,465. Now, if you did some proper fact finding and arrived at that $1 million, not just by tossing out numbers, but by asking the client how much income they need to have replaced, how much does their family need to live on if they're not able to produce that income. So ask the right questions, and through your fact finder, you've determined this client really needs $50,000 a year for 20 years. Well, 50,000 times 20 years, that's $1 million, right? Well, there's a few insurance companies out there, Transamerica, Protective, AIG. They allow you to change how that death benefit is paid out on the ill, and this is built into the product, and the policy is sold that way. So instead of having $1 million as a lump sum, their beneficiaries will actually receive $50,000 a year for 20 years. And this will work, one, to make it easy for the client to understand. They can understand $50,000 a year for 20 years. It might be a little tougher to explain to them, okay, to generate $50,000 a year for 20 years, we're going to need a lump sum of $1 million invested at such and such rate of return and accounting for a certain percentage of inflation. And I tell you what, if the client hasn't fallen asleep, you've lost them somewhere along that conversation. Even if they're following you, when they wake up the next morning, they're not going to remember how you arrived at that $1 million. So it's a lot easier for many consumers to understand $50,000 a year for 20 years. Yeah, that's what my family needs. That replaces my salary or whatever portion of that was appropriate. This will also work if your client doesn't trust their other family members. Maybe they don't want their spouse to inherit a huge lump sum of money right away. They don't think they're going to spend it wisely. This is especially true of teenagers and young adults. The parents don't trust that their 20-year-old isn't going to go blow that money on new shoes and new cars and parties and whatnot. So this is a way that the insured can control the amount of money that goes out from beyond the grave, and without having to pay an attorney to set up a trust to do the same thing. This has often been referred to as the poor man's trust. But anyway, plenty of applications for this concept. But the premium, for our purposes here this morning, is the big thing. We took the client from $1,465 down to $1,130. That's not going to appear on any spreadsheet comparison that you run. You've got to go in and dig into the details and run this separately through WinFlex Web, or call us over here, and we can help you arrive at that. So we've saved our client 23%. That's not too bad. Now, if our client has a decreasing insurance need, we can actually save them even more than 23%. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to ladder the policies. And once again, to do something like this, it requires that you have done some very thorough fact-finding. You've done a needs analysis with your client and didn't just throw out a bunch of numbers. I'll get you quotes on $250, $500,000, and $1 million, and which one do you want? If they can even decide on anything, it's probably not going to be appropriate. They're not going to know why they purchased what they purchased. So if we ask our client a few questions, we might come to this conclusion in this situation. For this purpose, our hypothetical client has a 30-year mortgage, but he's 10 years into it already. So we need some sort of coverage to cover the next 20 years of that mortgage. Plans to retire in 30 years, so we need some income replacement for a full 30 years. And this person has 2 children. One is 5, and we're going to assume this 5-year-old is going to be moved out of the house in 15 years. So we're not going to need to support that child at that point in time. Same thing for the 10-year-old in the household. We've got 10 years of support, of income replacement, and then that need will also go away. Now, keep in mind this is hypothetical, and things don't really work out that way. For purposes of illustration, it's going to make things a little nicer here. So here's what that does to our premium. Now, once again, if we added up all those income replacement needs and wanted to pay off the mortgage in this person's situation, we end up with a need of $1 million. And the need goes for 30 years, right, until this person retires. Well, that's going to cost our client the same $1,465 that we saw previously. And if they paid that for 30 years, they would have paid in almost $44,000. Now, we're going to cut that total premium in half, believe it or not. What we're going to do here is ladder separate policies that match each of those needs that I just described. So we're going to get our client 4 $250,000 policies for 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, and 10 years. Now, initially, our premium has dropped all the way to $1,075. That's 7% savings of our $1,465. And like all the infomercials out there, but wait, there's more, right? So once we get to year 11, guess what? Our 10-year term drops off. Now we're saving another $173 per year that we didn't have to pay before. So now we're down to $902. That looks better. What happens in year 16? Our 15-year term has dropped off. Now we're down to $694. We're getting close to half of that initial premium there. And then year 21, our 20-year term drops off, and we're only paying $430 a year because that matches our client's need that we determined through some thorough fact finding. So when it's all said and done, our client pays $20,888 out of pocket instead of nearly $40,000. That works out to be over a 50% savings in premium. Now tell me this, do you want to be the producer who throws out some numbers and just quotes your client the $1 million a 30-year term, or the one who asks some questions and can show your client something like this, where you're going to be cutting their premium in half? I guarantee they're going to buy from you, not only because you showed them a much lower price, because you took some time to really understand their situation and craft a plan that matches their life more precisely. So I guarantee you most people out there are not going through all these steps to try to help out their clients this much. All right, so that was laddering. Now, if our client has a decreasing need, kind of like what we just discussed, there's another way to save them some money here. So this idea works well with just the mortgage in mind. We're not going to worry about income replacement right now, but this is pretty common. People buy a house, or they refinance, and now all of a sudden they're concerned about covering that mortgage. And it used to be years ago, some companies offered decreasing term life insurance, and that fell out of favor, and I don't know if anybody's even offering it anymore. I haven't seen it in close to 10 years here at Financial Brokerage, but problem became you could buy a level term policy for less money than a decreasing term policy. So there was no reason to purchase that. Well, one of our companies here has found a way to mimic those decreasing term policies, and I'll show you how it works. So in our example this time, we've got this 40-year-old male. He's in good shape, a preferred non-smoker, and he's just taken out a 30-year mortgage on his $250,000 home. So what do we typically do? Well, we find him a 30-year term for $250,000 and think we've got it covered. And it's going to cost him $435 a year. And just this morning, and once you know it, the same price came up with 3 different life insurance companies. Now, that's not a whole lot of premium necessarily, but let's say we want to save our clients some money beyond that $435. Well, what can we do? Well, here's an example of our amortization schedule, and you can find numerous calculators on the internet to do this. You can plug in their interest rate and the amount and see what that principal is going to reduce to over time. Or if they've just taken out a mortgage, they probably have a copy of this already. Here's that same amortization schedule laid next to part of the illustration from Protective Life's 20-year term. Now, this 20-year term isn't really a term policy. It's filed at the states as a universal life. And because of that, they can do some pretty unique things that you're not going to see on other policies here. So again, on the left-hand side, we've got the principal balance. On the right-hand side, we've got the death benefit. Now, to make this work, I had to start out at $260,000. And I'm using a 20-year product in this case. And you can see there our premium is only $224 a year. Now, we'll go back here to this 30-year term for $250. It cost us $435 a year. So now we're down to $224. We've cut a couple $100 off the annual premium for the client, and we've given them $10,000 more coverage. If that's all we did, That would be great. But look what happens here in year 21. The way this product works, it's designed so that once you get past that initial quote term period, the client has an option to keep paying the same premium they've always paid, while the death benefit decreases to match the cost of insurance. And that's what you see there. And if you look going across there, you can see that our death benefit almost always, in this example, is the same or slightly higher than the remaining principal balance on the mortgage. So this is a great way to mimic that old decreasing term while giving our client a lot more value in those early years and for less money. So that's something you can utilize as well. In fact, that savings ends up being 49% if we look at that decreasing death benefit UL premium there. And I've got a couple more ideas that involve actually increasing the initial premiums next. But to kind of recap this first part here, our traditional plan was $1,465, and if we look at an income stream death benefit option, we can save our client 23%. If we look at laddering, we might be able to save our client a little more, 27%. And in the example of just the mortgage, we're going to save our client about 49% on that initial premium. All right, so now the ideas that can help you obtain more premiums up front while giving our client a huge savings down the road. Now, this first example comes to us from Prudential. The second one comes to me from Protective Life. But in both of these examples, we've got situations where a universal life can actually end up costing our client less than term policies. So here's our Prudential example. We're assuming a 63-year-old male preferred non-smoker, and he has a need for 20 years of coverage. And we run the numbers here, and turns out that the premiums are $9,715. And I just realized I should have put the face amount on this slide for everybody. I'm trying to remember here. I think it might have been $1 million, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the ratios that are important here. Over 20 years, our clients paid in nearly $200,000, and you know what? He's 83. He doesn't have an option to convert anymore. That's it. The money is just gone. Well, what if instead of a term, we looked at a universal life? In this case, we're going to guarantee the product not for a lifetime, but for 20 years. So that's going to match our 20-year term. The client has, and we're going to pay it over 8 years only. So we're assuming our client has the money to do this. Client's going to end up paying just over 20 grand a year. At the end of year 20, the client has only paid in $161,000. We've saved them $33,000 along the way. Now, maybe 20 grand is too steep for our client. If we pay it over 12 years, now the client's only paying in $14,000 a year. For total $172,000, we still saved our client $21,000 over that time period. So again, if your clients have got the cash flow to do this, that's something to consider. In some cases, a UL can cost less than term. Now, I have another example of a similar situation here. This one comes to us from Protective Life. In this example, we're going to use a little bit younger client, 45-year-old, very best rate class out there. Guy runs marathons and everything. And we're going to borrow some of the ideas I discussed earlier with an income stream. So this person has a need for a $250,000 lump sum. Maybe they're going to pay off the mortgage with that, but their family still needs some income for the next 10 years. So we're going to give them a $250,000 lump sum plus a $60,000 a year income stream for 10 years. Now, we can run that as a 20-year term policy, or technically a 20-year UL, and that's going to cost our client $938 a year, but it's not too bad. But what happens 20 years down the road, and I get this all the time. I get a phone call, and we've got somebody who's in their 50s or 60s. Their initial term policy has run out. They didn't think they were going to need the coverage. Once they hit let's say age 65, and turns out, guess what? They still need the coverage. They still owe on their home. They bought a bigger house. They refinanced. They're still running their own business, or maybe they've started their own business and it's going like gangbusters. They need the coverage. Maybe they need the coverage for a second wife or to pay off the first one. A whole bunch of things could come up at that point in time, but it happens a lot. Person 65, they still need that coverage they didn't initially think they're going to need. Okay, so now we're going to run them in this situation a UL. We want to get them to the end of their life, and this person doesn't have longevity on their side, so we're just going to run the UL for 30 years. We're going to guarantee it to age 95. It's going to cost us almost $13,000 a year. And by age 95, our clients paid in $404,000. All right, so here's our what-if situation. What if instead of buying that term at age 45, we put our client into a universal life that was guaranteed all the way out to age 95? We did that from the very start. Well, it's going to increase our premium by about 4 times initially to $4,428, but that's going to remain level all the way through age 95. So we're not going to see that huge jump at age 65 when the unforeseen things happen, and guess what? Our client still needs some coverage. Over time, our client's only going to pay $221,000. We've saved them 54% over their lifetime off of what they would have had to pay otherwise. And again, keep in mind, your client has to have the cash flow to do this. This isn't going to save them money today. It's going to save them money in the long run. So these examples are, I'd say, the opposite of the first 4 that we discussed here. But yes, you're going to come across different clients, and it's nice to have some options to turn to no matter what situation you come across. All right, so what do I do next? Well, if you run across some situations like this, I've got some fact finders from some of our insurance carriers here. I've got an article on my shorthand fact finder that I used to use out in the field. Be happy to share any of those with you. If you need them, just contact me via email or via phone over there. You can get into our quoting engines, and there's a needs analysis software out there. It's linked into that term and UL quoting engine. You can determine how much your client needs. You can use that for laddering. If you need to get into the income stream options, if you have an account on WinFlex Web, I highly recommend that. You can go in and go back and forth all day long and crunch numbers. I can do that for you as well over here, but I want to make it clear that you have access to the same software that I have access to over here as well. So for any of those ideas, there's all sorts of ways to get in touch with us over here. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up for questions here, and you can type those near the bottom of the control panel that you see on your right, and we'll go through those here. I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and if you know of some other producers out there who would benefit from this information, by all means, don't keep us a secret. We're never too busy to see who else we can help out here, and that new referral bonus that we like to pay out doesn't hurt one bit either. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll get to the questions here.